move it. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm excited to chat with Robin today all about solo travel, something that I have not done much at all, something that I've been kind of in my mind thinking about, but every time I've kind of tiptoed into it, I start to, I don't know, it's something I haven't done and something I'm anxious to hear more about. So, welcome, Robin.
Thank you so much for having me, April.
Sure. So I know right before we started recording, you were saying you literally kind of like sold everything and went to Thailand.
Yes. Yeah, I kind of had, I mean, it had been building over the years. I had a work to travel mentality. So I would work, save up my money, and then I'd go on these epic journeys with
Yeah.
a few friends from college. And then I would come back from the trips and want to just keep traveling.
Right.
And so one, it kind of, the call like got louder and louder. And in 2018, I knew I was like, it's time. I've got to just try this and see if I like it. And 5 years later, I'm still doing it.
Wow. So are you still in Thailand now then?
No, I'm currently living in Brazil.
Oh, nice. Okay. Wow. So I bet you had a lot of friends and family that were like, "What are you thinking? Why?" So how did you answer some of those concerns? I mean, because it sounds like you didn't even know anyone really in Thailand when you just decided.
Yeah, I knew some people who had been and they gave me some connections, but otherwise I didn't know anybody. And my family, everybody for the most part was really supportive because they knew this is something I had been wanting to do. But a lot of the comments that would come up were around like, oh, well, how are you going to afford that? And
Yes.
what are you going to do? What are you going to do for work? And aren't you going to be scared and lonely? And so there was a lot of like projections that would come up from other people, like just their own,
Right.
like trying to process.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I was pretty supported in it.
So now you do some remote work. What do you do as people would ask? Or are you able, is it much more affordable? So you're just able to kind of live on a lot less as well?
Yeah, it's both. So I gave myself a break when I first started out, and I didn't take on any work for the first like 8, 9 months. I just needed space after 11
Yeah.
years of corporate to just kind of
Yeah.
decompress and see if I even wanted to do this lifestyle. And then once I was clear, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I started getting into coaching and intuitive work, and that's what I do now. I'm an intuitive coach and I actually support others in taking their own solo journeys. And it's what I call SOULO.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I believe like, yes, you can go on a trip somewhere, but when you're traveling by yourself, specific, like, especially in an unfamiliar place, which is usually outside of your country or something, then it is a soul connection because you're learning so much about yourself. And that's what solo travel, like all travel opens that up, but there's something about it when you're on your own that it awakens something different.
Yeah, honestly, because you just have yourself to answer to. What time do you want to get up? Or it's a probably a very freeing experience, but for some people, it also very feels so unfamiliar. It can also kind of shut them down. So, what are some tips you have for women that are thinking about not traveling with their friends or their families and just venturing out on their own?
Yeah. And so one thing I say, and I support my clients with, is around a lot of the dialogue that we have in
Yeah.
our heads and the anxieties and fears that come up. Um, And it really depends on the person. Like some people need to go away for a weekend, like somewhere, even in the US, like maybe there's somewhere like a bigger city they need to go to, or a different state that they haven't been, or even a different neighborhood in their own city.
Yeah.
So some people need to start small. Others are like, need to just dive in, kind of like I did.
Right.
Um, and and so I find that there's a balance of both. And what I support people with really is that, like, building that confidence muscle. So giving them some challenges before they go on their journey. So it's almost like a simulation experiment where they're taking themselves out on a date, going to a dinner, like a restaurant by
Yeah.
yourself, sitting by yourself, not sitting, and really like being in your own company, spending time in nature alone, navigating. Like I lived in Dallas for so long and I didn't take the public bus until a couple years ago.
Right.
And so it's even things like that that I'll support people in, like, hey, why don't you try the public transportation in your city? And so those little challenges really support people. So when they do go off on their own, it's not as new.
Right. Yeah, because those are some of the hurdles, of course, is like actually sitting alone and having a meal for a lot of us. That's just so unfamiliar and can feel kind of scary, to be honest. It's like, what do you do with yourself? And so it's getting past each little hurdle. So you're right, those are some good tips. What types of accommodations do you recommend for women traveling solo? Are there places that might be a good balance if they do need some social interaction that
Yeah, there's a lot of for people who really want more of a community vibe when they're traveling, like a lot of hostels and co-working places have a lot of co-working places have lodging, and a lot of hostels have co-working spaces.
oh,
So
nice.
that's a really great place, and they have activities. And hostels, like a lot of times people think of hostels and they think like, oh, I'm going to be sleeping in a bunk bed, but they actually have accommodations for every style. So if you're really budget friendly and you're like, you know what, I don't mind, I want to be with others, then you can stay in a bunk bed with other people. Um, or if you're like, I want the community environment, but I want my own space, then you can have a private room, or maybe have a private room and a shared bathroom. So there's so many different
Yeah.
um, ways to accommodate each person and their comfort level. But I always find that's a really great way to surround yourself with people and community. And another recommendation I have for people is if you're not feeling that vibe, you're like, oh, I really want to be on my own, then an Airbnb experience is really great where you can get your own apartment, or you can even rent a room from a local, which is another great way because then you're getting that local experience and you're living, like getting to live with somebody who is from that country and in that place or in that city. And then you can still connect, like do a walking tour of the city and meet
Yeah.
people that way. So there's so many activities that you can really surround yourself with, and it really just depends on what feels most aligned for you and your style.
Yeah. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned yourself from solo traveling?
Oh, I mean, one of the beauties about solo travel is it kind of in a way forces you to show up for yourself. So if you're someone who is a little more reserved about asking for help or something, like I'm like I was like that where I was like, oh, I just want to do everything on my
Yeah.
own. I don't need, but I also I get lost a lot when especially when I'm in new places. And so I traveling by myself has helped me to really build that muscle to where I can go into a convenience store and just ask like, "Hey, can you tell me where the cathedral is? Or
Right.
can you tell me where this landmark is?" Or stopping somebody on the street and not being afraid to ask. And that's something that I've really learned is it's kind of like caused me to be in that. And then also to be really adaptable in the moment. So with all like any travel that happens, like things are going to go unplanned, and I've missed planes, trains, um, many different things like that. And so it changes in the moment, and then you got to be quick on your feet.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's really where asking for support. And I find that most people really want to help. So it's like when you're stepping into that like eagerness, and I always believe like attracts like, so how you
Yes.
show up. And so if you're showing up confidently and saying like, hey, I'm actually not sure where I'm going, or I missed my train, what do you recommend that I do? People want to help.
Yeah. I love that. I think that that is so true. I think we're hear so much negativity in our world today that it really, there's this fearfulness that doesn't really need to exist. I truly believe, like you said, if you're putting out positive energy and you're showing confidence, but also listening to your gut instincts as well, I think there are so many people that do want to help, but that are friendly and want to show you their city or help you find your way if you're lost. So I think there's more of that, thankfully, than what we're shown or taught or being led to believe.
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you tell people to budget for solo trips? Is that
Yeah, that's another area where it depends, really depends on your lifestyle. So if you are, depending on what you value. So I'll tell people like, okay, list what you value most. If dining out and experiences is something that you value, then start cutting back in your like current personal life so that you can enjoy more of that when you travel. Or if you're somebody who you're like, nope, I don't, that's not as important to me. I want street food. But I do want to stay in nicer areas and save for that. Um, that's where it's really like, I think like I don't really with budgets, I'm kind of like I just kind of go with the flow of the area, and I'll be mindful of like what like I may look and see like what the currency rate is, the exchange rate, before I go, so I'm familiar with that. And then I kind of adjust as I go. Um, but I find that like really knowing the currency is really going to be supportive, especially in countries where it's like 10, like a Thai baht is like 1,000 and
yeah,
it looks like it's really expensive, but really it breaks down to like, no, that's actually only $1. Um, so there's different things like that to be mindful of and look in. And then some people find that like setting a daily budget is
oh, okay.
supportive of them. So there's actually a lot of bloggers out there that will have like $50 a day,
Oh, wow.
$100 a day, $200, like different itineraries to fit different budgets. And that can really come in handy as well for those who are looking like if you're like, oh, okay, my budget is $100 a day, then maybe I'll eat lighter for these few days so that I can enjoy this really nice meal
Yeah,
on this other night. And so it's kind of just depends on the person and where they're at.
right. Do you have suggestions that are more budget friendly for solo travelers this year? Because I think that is, everything's just gone up in the United States, and I think I've been hearing from people internationally too. Other countries are experiencing this inflation. Eating out is getting more expensive. We all know that airfare, if you're waiting to book, is just getting crazy. So,
Yeah, and so traveling to Europe in summer is typically going to be more expensive. So that's where if you are someone who is a little more financially conscious in that regard, then it's best a lot of times to travel during shoulder season. So that's or low season or shoulder season. So that's the time when it's like in between like the high season and the low
yeah.
season. That's shoulder season. Low season is like in Brazil, we're entering into low season because it's about to be winter here.
Oh, okay.
So that's like typically like accommodations and things are less because they're not getting as many people traveling. Whereas if people were going to travel here in the fall, like the US fall, it's summer here
Oh, yeah.
and prices are going to be a lot higher. So that's one area to look for is like check the seasons, check. So Europe typically if you're traveling like early year to like March, April, it's going to be less than if you're traveling like June to September or May to September. Because that's usually the time is like when people are out of school.
Yep, yep.
That's when it's going to be higher. So, and if you are in that space where you don't have that flexibility to travel somewhere during a low season or a shoulder season, then you can still be mindful and you may just need to book things a little further in advance because things fill up a lot more, or stay in some other neighborhoods that are not like in the big popular touristy areas. And in some cities that really can mean only staying a couple streets over where
Oh,
it's not
wow.
that much
Yeah.
farther of a walk.
Yeah.
So I always find that that makes a difference too.
Yeah, that does make a difference. So if people are considering leaving the states as such for like longer time periods, are there things that they need to check into, like visas or work permits, or are there special things that they might need to consider before they, you keep hearing these stories of someone showing up at the airport and then, they don't have the right documentation, and
Yeah.
that's a bad move too. So,
Yeah, so these days you definitely want to check your passport. And if it's expiring within 6 months, then you need to renew it before you can travel somewhere because they will check that.
okay.
Um, so that's really important. And the passport wait times right now are a lot longer. So if you do find, like, my passport is expiring in June of next year, but I'll need to renew it before the end of the year because then I'll have that 6 month window
Mm-hmm.
where the validity of it won't be like I won't be able to travel within that window. So that's something I'm already being proactive about and thinking about. So passports is one, and then also COVID regulations. Even though most of the world we've kind of moved on from that,
Right.
um, it's still important to look and see what the country's guidelines are, because some countries are still requiring that you be fully vaccinated before you enter into the country, or you have a negative test, or you have documentation. So just being clear on what each country's regulations are around that. And you can always just Google, you can go to the CDC website, or you can just Google whatever the country is, like Costa Rica COVID regulations, and see what comes up. And then in terms of visas, that's the other, you can Google and see most of the countries, like popular ones like in Europe and around South America and Southeast Asia, will allow you to travel on a tourist visa, and it's
Oh,
typically up
okay.
to 90 days. But there are some countries like Vietnam where you have to apply in advance, or India, you have to apply in advance. So it's important to have that information as well. And you can always, same thing, you can Google, just look like country, like Thailand visa laws or
Right.
regulations or something, and see what comes up. And then there are agencies, if you really don't want to do it yourself, there are agencies out there that will support you with visas, passports, like all of that, and even expediting. Um, so those are some of the main things to look for before you go. And then otherwise, just have like, check, be mindful of what the weather is going to be
Yeah.
like so that you're prepared clothing wise. But that's the other thing I always say, like, we always think we need to bring everything with us. But you usually can find what you need. Like if you bring your basic items, that
Yeah.
prescription, like contact, like I have contact lenses, things like that, like make sure you're stocked up there. But other things, it's like if you find there's a rainstorm and you didn't bring your jacket, then that's typically something you'll be able to find.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So let's talk a minute about your planning, and I don't know if you call them expeditions or solo, SOULO, journeys or workshops. Tell me about those. I saw you had a little thing going to Brazil soon.
Yeah, so it's a retreat,
Okay.
and but I like to call it an experience because it's a little different from like a typical, like, when, I mean, there's different retreats,
Yeah.
but with this particular experience, I'm really giving people it's inviting them to step into a new country, a new place that might be a little more intimidating, a little more exotic, a little more foreign than
Yeah.
going somewhere where you're used to like everybody speaking English and accommodating in that way. And so, and then giving like a taste of being in the city and learning to do some things on your own in that regard, and then being out in nature and really like connecting with yourself and the soul from that level. So it kind of merges the two aspects. And then there's different, so each one has its different themes. So for Brazil, it's called Heart Leap.
Oh,
And
nice.
it's really for people who they're feeling a nudge. Um, they may not know necessarily what they're being called to,
Right.
but they know that there's something in their life that they're like, oh, there's something. I just feel like something is changing, or that I'm wanting something more. And so it supports and really getting clarity around that, through connecting with the culture here, with the
Yeah.
land, with these activities. So yeah, so I'm excited about that. This is the first solo experience that I'm launching.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds exciting. So how many
Yeah.
people do you expect are going to be part of this or?
So for this particular one, I'm really wanting it to be a little more intimate. So 4 people is 4 to 6, but 4 is my ideal number. And because I want each person to really be able to have the support that they
Right.
need, and then also have other people in the group that they can lean on as well, and form those deeper connections, because that's really what, to me, what travel is about, is all of the deeper connections that we make.
Yeah, exactly. So what is a typical day going to look like on the experience?
So when we're in the city, there will be little challenges. I like to say that it's not Survivor or Amazing Race,
Right.
but it will have challenges to kind of support you in building that confidence muscle.
Yeah.
So I'll have different experiences where um, they may be teamed up. Like you may have a buddy, and then go like, "Oh, take the metro or the subway to this location, and then
Right.
when you get to this location, here's what you're going to find." So there's going to be little challenges like that, and then when we're in nature, there's different activities and excursions, adventure, like really adventurous, like a Jeep tour
Oh,
that takes
wow.
you out to an island, and then you return by boat. And so there's different activities like that. And then it also includes a photo shoot, to support each person in really connecting with their authentic expression. So throughout the week, we'll be really taking, like, each activity will be supporting each person and like really uncovering and discovering more of their essence. And then the photo
Yeah.
shoot will capture that,
Oh,
with a
wow.
local photographer in a beautiful location in nature.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It sounds really incredible. This is exciting.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm really, yeah, really
So
excited.
tell us about the food. Are the meals included? Are people going to be sent with suggestions to go out solo and do their
Yeah,
cooking
so
experience or?
it'll be a mix of both. Like in the city, there may be sometimes when they're on their own and finding meals. And then when we're staying, we'll actually be staying at a retreat center when we
Oh,
go out in
nice.
nature. And so meals will be included in that space. And then there will be a free day, during the retreat, where the attendees can go and do whatever they want. And on that day, they're on their own. So it will depend. Like some people may choose to do another adventurous activity, an excursion in nature. Others may say, like, hey, I actually want to explore the island and check out some of the shops and restaurants here. So there's a mix of both.
Yeah, it sounds really cool, Robin. I bet you're excited to launch it.
I am. I really am.
So, do you have other places on your horizon that you haven't traveled to that you want to explore?
Yes. I mean, I'm one of those people who I'm like, I want to go everywhere.
Yes.
But most in the near future, I would really like to go back to Southeast Asia. Because when I went, I lived in Thailand, and I only made it to Thailand and Singapore. So I'd really love to explore Vietnam, Japan, India's on my list as well. So I would say in the near future, those are the places I'm looking at.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll design some expeditions there as well, or?
Yeah, I'm leaning into that, especially since I'm going to New Zealand for a couple months at the
Oh,
end of the
wow.
year. So I'll be on that side of the world. So I am
Yeah.
leaning into, somewhere over there.
So, what are some tips before you go if people are interested in that first solo trip? I know you mentioned looking at places nearby, do you think it's better that they road trip, fly? I mean, I think this summer is going to be a mixed bag as far as travel from what we're hearing, crowded airports and pricing.
Yeah, I would say like do what's not in your norm. So if you're someone who you're used to flying somewhere, unless you're going like really far away, then maybe explore what it would be like to road trip.
Yeah.
Like when the pandemic hit, I found myself back in Dallas and my travels had stopped, and I rented a car and I drove to Colorado
Oh,
because
wow.
I still
Yeah.
need to just have a change of scenery
Yeah.
and just some space to myself. So I love that. And then train travel is another really great way to explore and see the country, including the US. Amtrak goes all over the US, and that's a really great way. And then pretty much anywhere you go in the world, especially in Europe, it's very connected by train. So I really recommend that as well. And yeah,
That's
I
a
would say
great
just like,
trip, actually,
yeah,
trains, because I don't think we often, at least in the United States, for any of us kind of outside of New York City, most of us have our own car. We're just so accustomed to like, we either fly or we take our car, and we forget there's actually a train system here in the States. And taking the train might be a really great way to A, be solo, but also if you want, there are other people riding the train. And so you're
yeah.
not completely alone, and you take away that factor of, well, how do I drive? And just that, all that aloneness aspect. It's kind of a nice blend, it sounds like.
Yeah, and there's so many beautiful destinations. Like I've taken the train many times in Colorado through the Rockies. And that same train ride goes through Utah into California. And so there's so many options, and you can even like split it up where if you want to take the train to a city and then stay in the city for a few days and then get on the train and go to another location, or if you want to spend the night on the train, they have cabins that
Oh, yeah.
you can pay to sleep in a cabin and have your own little bed. And so there's many options, but I think that's a really great way to travel.
That is a great idea. So if people want to reach out to you, Robin, where do they find your website? How do they get in touch with you? Especially for all of our women. I know I have a lot of women asking questions about this very topic, solo travel. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So my website, Instagram, Facebook is all Wandering Ant, and it's AUNT. So you can find me that way.
okay, great. Thank you so much, Robin. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, April. It's a pleasure to be here.